So we're going to be touching on something that we've been touching on sort of all day, really, in one way or another, and certainly in this track, which is energy. AI is demanding a huge amount of energy, much, much more than traditional computing workloads. I'm hearing all kinds of different figures all day, but maybe 4 times the computing power, etc. And that is a problem, not just because of the sort of technical challenge of meeting those demands, but because of emissions, right? It's doing it with clean energy. We've seen Microsoft's emissions up by 1/3 over the last 5 years, Google's up by half in the last 5 years, at a time when we've had all these net zero commitments to and should be trending downwards on emissions. Much of the renewable technology is there. It's certainly here in Denmark and in Finland, but it's not at the sort of the capacity or the readiness or in the right place or with the right sort of reliability that we need it to be to meet that demand. And all of that demand is coming at the same time as we're trying to electrify the grid. There's demand from electric vehicles, etc. So there's a whole host of challenges there. So the questions to tackle on our panel over the next 43 minutes and 23 seconds are: how can we support AI's growth in a way that is sustainable and net positive for the planet? What renewable energy innovations can best scale to meet rising power needs? How can AI workloads be optimized to lower energy consumption, that efficiency question? And how can governments and the private sector and maybe some of the other players in this space better collaborate to incentivize the use of renewables? With me to discuss are Christine Kirkpatrick, Division Director of Research Data Services at San Diego Supercomputer Center. You're actually in the order on my list, which is fantastic. Per Öster, Director of the Advanced Computing Facility at the CSC IT Center for Science in Finland, which hosts and operates the great Lumi supercomputer. And Stephen Carlini, Chief Advocate of Data Centers and AI at Schneider Electric. Welcome all. So maybe let's just sort of set the scene here then. What are the primary constraints we face? Christine, I'm going to come to you first, but anybody else can jump in. Why aren't we meeting this capacity growth with renewables?
Sure. Well, we had a wonderful dinner last night where Steve reminded us that the last 20 years we didn't really add capacity. We were making things more efficient, but now we've hit kind of the wall of that. In the US, the Boston Consulting Group, BCG, said that usage is now 156 terawatt hours for data centers. That's just the US. And that in 5 years, we're going to need 335 terawatt hours. So you don't have to be very good at math to know that's a lot more capacity that needs to be added. And so it's not a matter of what kind of power, it's what can you add in the next 5 years. And that's pretty much things that are shovel ready. It's not, SMRs, they'll come online when they do. I'm guessing in the US 10 years, because it'll be difficult regulatory space. And you'll probably do it here first, and then we can follow. That'll be great. I think the good news is that the shovel-ready projects in the US, barring, I haven't read the news in the last hour of what's happened in the US, but barring something crazy, the renewable projects are the ones that are ready to be built. And so it's not a matter of what, it's how fast can you do it?
When I think of the high-profile cases in the US, I think of X being under fire for ramping up its data centers with gas turbines that sort of breach local limits, right? Because they seem to be the way that they can respond, or utilities can't respond quick enough to their needs. Do you see this as just a sort of short-term problem? I'll come to you, Stephen, next. You're suggesting that maybe we know what the longer-term solutions are, but we've got a bridging issue here.
There's only so many gas turbines that are available to be installed. So it's a short-term issue. It's not like they can just pump those out, every day of the week. And they're going to have to go to renewables and the things that are ready. What I think is a real constraint in the US is that there's no certainty in the market. So investors don't know how to price a project. Banks don't know how to set the value of the projects either. And so people aren't wanting to lend. Everybody's holding back. that's hurting us more than really anything else, if you ask me.
Stephen, what do you think are the real constraints?
Yeah, I think at first, I mean, it's a development that have been going on for quite some time now on scaling up data centers. Not even before the AI took off, so to say that. And the first wave was, of course, the wise have been looking for the opportunities because power-hungry industry is nothing new. We heard mentioned here the aluminium smelters, steel industry, etc. There you have sites that are in the 100 megawatt to gigawatt range. It is enormous power hungry. And paper industry is one that I have to mention. Of course, there is some opportunities there. You can use sites like that when they have closed down for some reason, like we do in Finland with the paper industry that have been closing down sites. And then there is infrastructure there in terms of local power production, typically, because they were so power hungry that they really built them on places where they had hydroelectric or other green power, so to say. And then one can reuse these sites, but there is, of course, a limit in only those opportunities. But of course, then one can look into how that is done and learn from that. And I think this is also because that's our experience, that the location is extremely important here, that the number of factors that you have to take into account. I mean, it's need to be climate favorable, because you can do free cooling to some extent. You need to have infrastructure that is there, and if you are thinking of heat reuse, you need to have someone that can take the heat, and that is determined by the location. They don't come to you; you have to come to them, and that is not easy to arrange. But there are opportunities, and one have to look for them.
But perhaps you could say a little bit more about LUMI and your experience with that, because I understand that is, it's one of the top supercomputers in the world, and it's carbon negative, right?
Yeah, well, it is to some, you could say that because we have a very successful heat reuse. And because where we deliver the excess heat to the local district heating in the city of Kajani, where the data center is located. And with that, they could reduce because they were previously at least burning oil for some of their heating, so they could reduce that. So in that sense, it's carbon negative. But it's it's a nice marketing thing, but the truth is, maybe I have to be careful with it. That works, but one have to, and that is maybe good to mention. Then in that, if one thinking of heat reuse, one need to have a business model for it, because it requires extra investment. And then you need to see how you can cost this and get the cost back. And what we do, we sell the heat to the local district heating, and in that sense, over the lifetime of the system, we can make this at least zero-sum thing. I mean, we don't make much profit out of it. And I think also that we see in some, now I know, of course, Finland best here, but I see in some cases, that the cities are, where they see these opportunities, they're also preparing to take this kind of excess heat. So now when they in Kajani are renewing their heat plant there, some of the technology that we have had, they move into their site, because there are new data centers coming now that want to use this thing also.
Stephen, what do you think are the main barriers here? Is it sort of cost or reliability? What are the main things that are stopping more immediately responding with renewables?
Well, I think it's a great time to be in the utility business. It's for 2 decades in Europe and in the U.S., we saw this energy transition. For 2 decades, there was really no growth. Now, all of a sudden, spurred by data centers and reshoring and electrification of HVAC and electrification of transport, there's a big surge in utility capacity that's being projected. There were some issues with supply chains with, wind and solar that caused us to get a little bit behind. But, it's definitely a situation where, and this is the question I get asked the most, is are we going to count on the utilities to add capacity, or are we going to wait for new technologies, and are we going to bridge it, and how are we going to bridge it? The utilities are set up for short-term reserve power. They do have peaker plants. They do have plants, turbines in reserve that they turn on in situations when the grid is under stress. But
in some places,
in some
not in Ireland, really.
in some places, and you have the situation where the grid is becoming more and more complex. We still don't know what happened in the Iberian Peninsula, how what caused that, and why it took so long to resolve. We had the same thing happen in Texas. We kind of know what happened there, but the data centers kind of weathered through it. None of the data centers in that region actually went down. It was amazing, but it's cooperating with the utilities. Data centers have notoriously been averse. It's a culture clash. You have the data center operators that are move fast, get things done, and you have the utilities that are highly regulated all over the world, and they can't move fast. It's not that they don't want to move fast, but you have this culture clash. But what you're seeing is more of a cooperation. There's agreements being made to secure permits, to secure power. Data centers, in some cases, are agreeing at certain periods of time, already preset, they're going to go on longer-term backup power. Or they're agreeing, as requested, they will offload. There's a program, an initiative called DC Flex. And it started in the U.S., it started in October. It's the utility providers, it's the major data center operators. And the idea is the data centers can become much more flexible in dealing with the utilities. Schneider's part of it. All of the hyperscalers are part of it. A lot of the U.S. utilities and now the European utilities. So at the beginning, it's going to be agreements. Then we're working on technology to share data between the data centers and the utilities. And in the future, it's going to be automated. So the data center, because we're adding more generator capacity. It's a little known secret. We're adding more battery capacity. A lot of the data centers we're speccing in right now are all have 2 hours of battery. So they're going to have battery storage in the future. When there's more green hydrogen, they'll have fuel cells. So they're going to be part of this grid ecosystem, and they're going to be cooperating with the data center operators. So it doesn't have to be that we're putting, 100 gigawatts of data centers online, we need another 100 gigawatts of power. There is capacity in the grid. And just, short periods of time when the grid is under stress, that we have to be innovative and how to deal with it.
And I want to come back to that, the question of collaboration.
Yeah.
I think that's an interesting one, and partnerships, and certainly working with government as well. But just, you've mentioned a few technologies sort of in the mix here, and I'm just curious to what we envisage maybe in the medium term being the right sort of setup, because renewables will have their issues, every intermittency around where the energy is versus where it needs to be, all those kinds of things, the scale of which these arrays take up. Everywhere's going to be slightly different. What do you envisage as the right mix, and that is going to be something that can be replicated in most parts of the world? Because we'll get onto this as well, and it's a shame our other panelist isn't here. But we are also hearing a lot about sovereignty, the need for data to be processed in its place. Everywhere in the world is going to need this kind of technology. So what's the right technology mix, Christine?
What I can just speak for my own experience. So I've got a data center that was planned in the 80s, and I'm living with it, and so I'm doing what I can with it. I'm also in California, which has a number of regulations to comply with, also federal regulations. At least, again, in the last hour, I don't think they were rolled back, but maybe by the end of the day. So I've got a megawatt diesel generator, and that's at the maximum capacity for the permit. So I've got a 3.5 megawatt load, and everybody would like to be behind the generator if they could afford that. But that's not possible. And so one thing that we did is we invested in a I wouldn't say new technology, I'd say a new application of an old technology. We replaced several of our UPSs with a little over 10,000 alkaline cells, basically kind of like the battery in your remote. And it's most of the battery systems out there that I'd encountered are for peak shaving, like charge them up when the power is cheap and discharge it when power is really expensive. And that's not what I needed. I needed something standing by because our UPS time was only about 24 minutes. And if you've ever run a storage array or a database, that is not enough time, even if you're sitting at your terminal sometimes. So we were able to up that to 3 hours. And so I'd like to lift up what Steve said. I think a 2-hour battery system, I think every data center should have that. And so I've got 1 more megawatt of that battery power for the people that aren't on generator. And then also you need these to condition power as well. UPSs are so important for that. A lot of the street power is just way too noisy. And so you need a combination of these applications.
I mean, I guess one question here, Per, is how do you make more Lumis, right? What is the technology that can be scaled to other parts of the world?
Yeah. So that is, I mean, of course, one can learn from ideas, and I come back to this. My primary argument: location is the thing. Yeah, one doesn't put the big data center. I mean, some of these things need to be, because they are latency driven, like they are doing computing for the stock market and etc. You need to, that is need a data center of the in Frankfurt or whatever. But most of the things are not latency driven. You can have it far away where the location is suitable, and really you can find these various components that can give you a green environment that are favorable in other measures also. So I think that is the thing I can tell, what our experience with Lumi, and also reuse. What we have done with Lumi is that, as I told, we have moved into an old paper mill where we're also reusing the buildings. I mean, there were huge buildings here for paper machines. So what we do, we build our data center inside this building, yeah? So you get rid of a lot of the concrete stuff that are also CO2 generating when you build your data center. So, but and the lesson: use the location and find these kind of places, and there are many of these in the Nordics, particularly. But there is also, of course, an end to that kind of locations. Yeah, so. There will be other problems that have come up, and one have to replicate and learn of other things from these sites and experience them in how to get a more sustainable operation.
Yeah, one thing a lot of companies don't know about, unless they are trying to deploy a data center with thousands of GPUs in parallel, which is an AI cluster, is there's this phenomenon going on called subcycle oscillation. And what it is you parallel that many GPUs, and every once in a while it'll feed back a nasty spike through the utility. So you're going to see some white papers come out on this. Schneider is working with NVIDIA on this. But the UPSs that for these AI data centers have more capacitance and sometimes supercapacitance to ride through this, because the utilities are seeing this. And before you can commission that data center and bring it online, you have to show them that you don't have this phenomenon. So because of these new servers that we're deploying, the need for certain type of power through the UPSs we're calling them AI ready UPSs, are designed to account for that. And you see some of the other data center operators actually putting in just purpose-built supercapacitors or battery systems to kind of smooth out the power. So on the renewable side, I think the data centers need power sources that have a lot of inertia. So big turbines from fossil fuels are good. Hydro is good. Wind and solar, in a lot of cases, is going to need some kind of stabilization. So
was the issue in Spain and
Yeah.
Portugal. Right?
So the utilities are having to invest in, a large, energy storage batteries if they're going to power, applications like data or bigger data centers because of the inertia problem that their, loads are coming on and off, and it could, cause this, cycling effect of the power, the frequency, and the voltage. So you're going to start seeing battery storage systems before and behind the meters. You're going to see more and more of that being deployed in the utility grids.
So it really is coming down to the grid, or the relationship between data center operators and grid operators, right? And this seems to be the key of it. And when data centers are going to be taking up 10, 20% of electricity demand in some places, how can that collaboration, that communication, what's the right operating model for those different relationships? Because it seems that's the key to making this work.
Yeah, I have a comment to this because it's an important thing here to learn. That's one thing to learn. One have to understand what is the load, what is the thing I'm doing in my data center. Yeah? And I can say we some similar experience here with Lumi. Because we to give back the heat, we have to use heat pumps because they need really hot water back to the city up to 80 degrees. We get about 40, just about 40 out of the machine, and you need to lift it to 80 degrees. That is still a good equation. The heat pumps are very efficient. But the heat pumps are mostly efficient when they can run on a very steady load, steady temperature. But the load in the machine, it could go a bit up and down. Yeah. So there we need to stabilize that. We have enormous water tanks like caches to stabilize this heat, so you can get the heat pumps run efficiently. Huh? And all these things you have to plan and think for. And it's very similar to this battery thing and having this kind of understanding of what is the load and how does it work in the environment. When you go to these enormous scales, it has huge effects also, these things.
Yeah, and it's an interesting point while you brought up the pumps. In a liquid-cooled data center, you have two loops. You have the loop going to the IT equipment back, and those pumps cannot go down for even a couple of seconds.
Yeah.
So those actually have to go, on the UPS systems as well now. So it's a different, design philosophy than you used to have when you just had air-cooled data centers, because at the densities like the new Blackwells that are running 132 kilowatts per rack, and with the future having the Rubens at 240 or above, and then these new designs for 1 megawatt racks that Google showed last week that you're going to have to cool. The integrity of the liquids going to and from the chips is has to be maintained.
To this question about how we can better integrate data centers and grid operators, what's your view on this, Christine, about what it looks like?
Well, I mean, there's the way that it could work, and then there's the way that it does work.
Start with where it does, and very good.
I mean, I think it's a meta story about the grid at large. And again, I'm in the U.S., so I could speak from that experience. Like in the U.S., it would be really efficient if we took where the wind is plentiful and transmitted it to the coast. Will never happen because people don't want transmission running through their state. And of course, the states that are windy are red, and they believe in oil and gas, I guess. I don't know. So there's all these reasons. So you end up with these situations of what can be done, which is people build things where they can. They generally, more and more, because there's not enough power, have to go it alone. And so they're building things that are 2 and 3 times the cost of if we built something more efficient. Like look at the difference between Tokyo as a city with the metro that goes atop the city and you can get around quickly versus Southern California. I don't know if anyone's tried to get anywhere quickly. 40 minutes is about the quickest because everyone has their car and you need parking lots for that. And this is kind of what we've got going on with data centers trying to get their own power. we're turning back on 3 Mile Island, right, for a Microsoft data center. I mean, things are in a pretty crazy state. So how could it work better? I think, one, we would focus on an efficient grid, not just for data centers, just for all of our other demands. Some of the ways that you can do that is many of the utilities right now are optimizing for price. So when you optimize for price, people only build something if they know they can sell it at that price. If you optimized for efficiency, you would get people putting new kinds of power sources, maybe even big battery arrays online just for the peaks. And we used to have this in the US up until a few months ago. Foreign governments, places like Electricité de France, we're building out things in the US. But because of geopolitics, that will have to be pulled back because why would they invest in the US? And so we'll see less and less capacity come online. The utilities will have less resources to draw upon. Germany actually built towards efficiency, and they are stuck with some expensive resources, but they have that capacity when they need to surge again because of geopolitical reasons. So I guess I'd say it's above the data center's pay grade. It's something that governments need to work better to solve. And again, we need stability for that to move forward.
But it certainly seems, and I'd be curious to know where this works well, if there are examples where it works well. But it certainly seems like data centers should be playing a more active role in that rather than just demanding things from the grid.
Well, I mean, data centers are, I guess except at universities, are mostly places of business, and even we have to work on economics. And so I guess you have different shades of people having I don't know, green goals, if you will, to say it plainly. But I mean, you can't just rely on people to do the right thing because they should. You either have to legislate it for it, or you have to make it the economic interest.
Well, you said it though. Data centers aren't going to wait for the government. Elon turned on his natural gas turbines. He didn't even tell anybody.
Against full regulation anyway, right?
Yeah, no, didn't get any permits, didn't tell anybody, just put in the natural gas turbines and turn them on.
I mean, and certainly there's an issue with not even having the transparency on emissions use from data centers, right?
Oh, yeah.
There seems to be a lot more. I mean, how much more should governments be doing to regulate this, beginning with, and I think they are in Europe and elsewhere, transparency in reporting, but how actively should they be pushing renewables in this space?
Well, if they don't, then you're going to get what you have now, which are companies reporting what they want, when they want, and nobody's validating and looking at that data. So it's kind of the Wild West, where if you don't force them to do it, they're not going to naturally do it. I mean, there was big lawsuits about reporting water use because a lot of data center operators are saying, they don't, they're very secretive. Data center operators are extremely secretive, and they don't want to get into it. By the way, the 3 Mile Island, it's really not a light switch. It's a 12 to 15-year project.
Sure. Yeah.
So the government told Microsoft, you can fund it if you want, but you're not going to be involved with anything to do with the recommissioning or the operations. So they made that very clear. So a lot of this is kind of posturing, in my opinion. These contracts with Google, with SMRs that are supposed to come online in the next 4 years. Is that really going to happen? Yeah, we'll wait and see. But what's not going to happen, and I don't know if we talked about it, but if you want to put in the substation, you want to put in high voltage lines, you have to do that before the areas are populated. You can't go back like in Data Center Alley where they have all this congestion, and their proposal is trying to high voltage line down the main street, and everyone was like, "No, you can't do that. You can't do that." And they only wanted the residents to pay for it, which is another thing. So now we're in a situation where, in a lot of countries, the utilities are saying, data center, if you want the power, you have to pay for it, and you have to pay for it for, a certain amount of years. So agreements like that are coming into place that weren't the norm a few years ago. During the internet boom, it was the same thing. Data center operators were building it, exponential rates in the utilities. Utilities are run on forecasts and how accurate those forecasts are. With so many people requesting power for different projects, there is so much noise in those requests. It's very hard for them to figure out what's real, because commercial real estate, office buildings, are not sexy or investable anymore. So everyone's investing in data centers. So everyone has a data center project. Everyone's asking for power. Are we going to need that much power? No. It's probably 6 to 10 times, a higher request than what's actually going to be needed for the data center operators. So if the government's wanting to do something, they could regulate kind of the process for requesting power for data center projects. Would be a big one.
Well, and I think also regulating water, like speaking
yeah.
of the Wild West, and I think Steve's probably talking about Phoenix, where it's too complicated for some of the people that have the power, not the flexing their muscle power to give things away. There's a famous case where Phoenix overcommitted their municipal water supply to data centers. And I don't think anything was trying to do something bad. I think they're trying to get jobs there. They're trying to stimulate the economy, but they've sold out the future of that area. I mean, why can that occur?
Well, that is the thing. I think you've said earlier that it's a business decision, it's a business operation, data centers, but there's a lot in it for governments as well. It's very much a sovereignty question. There's a race there on the business side, but also on a government side. Yeah. There's a sort of obsession that AI is a race that we want to win. Mm-hmm. They think it's going to bring jobs to communities. That's happening on a global scale as well as within the global north, as it were. So it seems that in all of these cases, environmental concerns are taking a sort of secondary place to speed and cost.
Although tax credits, or at least in the US, I know we're the only ones that do that, I think, but tax credits have been incredibly beneficial to the renewable industry. And it's shown that you can do that and you can stimulate the adoption of new technologies and bring the cost curve down quicker. And that's gotten us to really cheap solar panels, right? It was very expensive at the beginning, and I think governments should try more of those levers and see what works, see where we get to. We can't afford not to try.
Yeah, talking about the taxes, that's another instrument, of course, government has. And I can take an example, but what it requires is that they are long-term commitments on this. Otherwise, it fails. I take a recent example from Finland, where it has been, we get a tax reduction if you fulfill certain environmental requirements on the data center, specifically for data centers, reuse of energy, etc. And then it was one politician here a bit wobbling on this, that, okay, maybe we should stop this. And immediately, of course, big plans that Google had, Microsoft had, commitment. Wait, do you expect us to invest? Shall we stop these plans, or what's there? But it need to be long term, and this is also something that politicians have to understand, that you can't just go in there with short term commitments or benefits and then take it off, because these are really, they're really long-term planning also, even if the IT industry is moving fast, but getting a big site, place it somewhere, it is really a number of years of planning to get it there.
I'm going to open up for questions in a second, so if you have them, cook them up and then raise your hand. Just on this question of long-term commitments, nuclear, what role should it play? What role will it play?
It's hugely important. We knew it would be important when we started into exascale computing, before we were talking about AI. Those are the really big supercomputers if you're not a HPC person. They're just, you just can't build fields of solar arrays quickly enough to generate that much power. Of course, I live in a place that's seismically allergic now to we've decommissioned all of our nuclear, or in the process of doing it. Right. But look what France has done to ride out some of these geopolitical storms and to provide power to other places and how important it's been. And so don't get me wrong, I'm crazy liberal into green energy, but I think it's undeniable that nuclear is needed.
Yeah, what is the nuclear is a very long-term thing to plan. I mean, if you from decision to get nuclear to where it can be implemented, it decades. Yeah, just from the experience of previous projects. And if you look on Europe here, it's maybe only France that are really, so say, strongly into nuclear. The large portion of the energy there is nuclear. Germany have said no. There is, and it's hard to see that nuclear will come back, although there are some political sentiment for it now. And then there are a few other countries that have nuclear, but it's more or less, there's very few new projects if you look around.
Yeah, traditional. Traditional
so that's-
nuclear is definitely was dead and buried, and the sentiment though for nuclear has shifted in the last 6 months to very very negative to very very positive, and a lot of that I think has to do with the fact that it's being projected the new small reactors are being I guess advertised as being very very safe. They're a different technology. They run on very very low grade uranium, and the chance of meltdown is zero. Basically, they're not water cooled. They don't need to be by a big body of water. They can be deployed on like an acre and a half of land, and from a technical perspective, even though there's none of them in operation, it's on paper. On paper, they seem like the silver bullet because they don't need distribution. You can put them on site or adjacent to site, and you could power your data center facilities from them. And they run from 25 megawatts up to like 300 megawatts. And there's different sizes and a few different technologies, but the barrier that I see is the refurbishing of this uranium. So they're going to use waste uranium from the power plants. So they're actually sitting at a lot of these power plants have like a stockpile of these, but there's no plants to refurbish them. So somehow, if you want this to work and you want it to work in the next few years, the planning has to start now to be able to convert this uranium.
And it's still relatively long term, right? It's meant to be much quicker. But one of the challenges I find in this space is that there still seems to be so much uncertainty around demand and where it's going to be, and nuclear seems a much longer play. Are there any questions in the audience? If we can pass around a roaming mic, got one here.
Good news for Homer Simpson. He's got a job back, right?
Right.
So Connor White from Lake here. There's been you had a lot of discussions regarding dependency between data centers and utilities. My question is more around, can the market play a role here in where AI compute is done? And what I mean by that is that we transfer AI compute, we schedule it based on the price of electricity or the carbon footprint of electricity. Because in Europe, for example, the growth of spot price contracts has been taking off as a result of the energy crisis and people wanting to optimize their energy consumption for the price of electricity. But that also comes with the benefit of a lower carbon footprint as well. And given that, as you said, there are regions that, for example, like in Iberia and places where they're very strong on solar and some areas are not so strong on solar, wouldn't it make sense that it would incentivize data centers to be available when it's cheap and then power down when it's not so cheap or not so carbon friendly, and then take the load somewhere else? Is that feasible, or do you see any potential in that?
If you're training an AI model, there are certain, points every 5 minutes that you could go back to, even if you have a power outage. So if you're training, you could stop at any time and go back to where you were. So if you're training a model, it makes a lot of perfect sense. As AI evolves and it gets embedded into the processes of businesses, and it's a working model, then you're not going to have that luxury. It's going to have to be operating, 100% of the time because your business is going to shut down. Like a lot of businesses shut down, today when the data centers go offline. Hotels, you can't check in. Restaurants can't take orders, things like that. So that it would be, very smart thinking if there was enough capacity to move the loads around. Is the other problem that you're dealing with right now? There's more demand to train these models than there is capacity to develop them.
Yeah, I mean, I think energy people would say, why don't you build a few different data centers and just push things around? And of course, if I'm Amazon, yeah, I could probably do that.
Yeah.
San Diego Supercomputer Center, probably not. And even that system, that beautiful system that we saw this morning, are they going to buy 191 DGX servers and, put it, at the other end of the country? I don't think so. And so it's just which thing is more scarce. But yes, you could be incentivized, and if the payoff is big enough, people are going to figure out how to do it. And hopefully there'll be better software to manage these things, and then little people like me can do it too.
I take your point. If you've got a supercomputer and it's located in a fixed place, you're stuck. But I'm talking about the big hyperscalers where we can move workloads potentially in the future from region to region based on whatever metric, price, carbon, whatever. Thank you.
Just final question, and this is a little bit outside the main narrative, but the view of the sort of big tech leaders in this space, Schmidt, Gates, etc., is that this whole conversation is just a complete triviality because AI is going to solve all these problems tenfold, right? It's both that this is an important race, it's life and death for companies and governments to pursue, and AI is going to do in some unspecified way solve climate change and solve these issues. What do you make of that?
Oh yeah, and it's sentient too, isn't it? No, I mean, I think it's not as far as along as people think. I'm involved in the Machine Learning Commons, a consortium of tech companies and universities that do benchmarking, and I can tell you that we're a long way off from the AI fixing the AI. That's just my opinion.
I pass on that one. Because it's,
Well, if AI is being used to decarbonize a lot of industries, transportation, the energy, manufacturing, some of the biggest carbon emitters are, AI is in there, making the processes more efficient. Is it going to, bring them to zero? Probably, no, but it's going to help.
There will be improvements all over the place.
Right.
But this stuff still matters. Yeah. All right. Well, that's all we've got time for.
There was one question from the audience.
Oh, we'll have one more question. Let's have one more question.
Make it a hard one for Per.
Yeah, so what I pick up here is there is not so much about technology, but a huge amount of political problems and political challenge in actually getting through this. But nevertheless, it seems that in the case of Finland, you've kind of overcome it. I mean, you've made possible to move into some far north strange region where not many people live, and you've managed to negotiate with the local people to give them the heat and so on. You've even managed to bring in computing from other countries. So this example that Christina explained about not being able to go through the one state for the other with electricity and so on, somehow you've overcome that. So how did you actually make it possible to bring other countries' supercomputing to your country, considering that probably was at the expense of local facilities and so on. So there must have been some pushback, but you seem to have managed it. So it is possible to overcome these political problems. So if you can do it, others might be able to do it too.
Yeah.
Can you come fix America?
We can talk about it.
Any comment, Per?
Yeah, well, it is as what maybe not everybody knows. So this Lumi supercomputer we have in Kajaani, which is a small city 600 kilometers north of Helsinki, so in middle of Finland. It is a machine funded by the European Commission, and then we are a consortium of 11 countries that have put in money into it. So this is what the thing there, a lot of, and they have shares from different countries using the machine and from all over Europe then. And then it's available for all research in Europe. So it is a it is possible to build something new and have others invest in it from different countries also, and to accept that. But it is a matter of trust. You have to spend a lot of work on building this trust, talking, engaging with people in these different countries, and convince and see what we can do together and build the trust. That is the thing.
I'm afraid we're over time, so thank you very much to all my panelists. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.